Mark of the Beast, 666, a prophecy from 2,000 years ago. It's a part of our culture. It's made its way into movies, songs, books. Kids talk about it. How many people, though, know that technological developments in the last 10 or 20 years could be combining to make the Mark of the Beast a reality, and possibly even in our lifetimes? I'm Katherine Albrecht, and today I'm going to be talking to you about the Mark of the Beast and about my own research over the last 4 years into the technological developments that have revolutionized and changed the way things are bought and sold on the planet Earth. I'll be talking to you about ways that will be developing at an incredible pace in the future, and some technological breakthroughs that are right on the brink of happening. And I believe that by the time we're finished with this, you will see many of the ways in which the Mark of the Beast could become a reality in our lifetimes. First, let me start out by saying this question, what is the Mark of the Beast, has occupied the minds of Christian scholars ever since it was first written down 2,000 years ago. In fact, I have in my hands a book, and this is one of my favorite books. It's called The Contribution, this is very dry and academic, I'll warn you, The Contribution of British Writers between 1560 and 1830 to the Interpretation of Revelation 13, 16 through 18. 3 little tiny biblical passages and over 330 pages of very dense scholarly research on just about a 250-year span of time in just one piece of the globe. An extraordinary amount of human ingenuity, intelligence, and energy has gone into trying to interpret the meaning of these passages, Revelations 13, 16 through 18. And what we will learn by the end of today is that much of this energy was probably wasted because it came before its time. Hundreds, if not thousands, of scholars have put thousands of pages of pen to paper to try to explain it. And yet this may be the first generation to actually understand what the Mark of the Beast may be. Let me start by reading the section of Revelations about which this entire book was written, the 3 little passages from the book of Revelations, the ending book of the Bible. And it says, He being the second of 2 beasts in the end times, he also forced everyone small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on his right hand or on his forehead, so that none could buy or sell unless he had the mark, which is the name of the beast or the number of his name. Now, what does this mean to have a mark without which you cannot buy or sell? Well, first of all, let me tell you that this particular passage is the entire reason why I am a Christian. And let me give you a little bit of my own personal background and history, and you can see how I've come to be so interested in the topic and why I've spent so much of my life devoted to trying to learn more about it. When I was a little girl, at age 8, in a little town in the Midwest, my grandmother took me to the grocery store. My mother was actually working on her master's thesis at the time, and which may explain why I have a penchant towards academic things myself and why I'm such a researcher. I'm actually working on a doctorate in consumer privacy issues at Harvard University. But at that time, I was an 8-year-old girl in the Midwest on a mink ranch, and my grandmother and I had just gotten back from grocery shopping. And as we put the groceries away, and we had the bags sitting there on the floor, she said, Kathy, and at that time I was Kathy, not Catherine. She said, sit down, I have something really important I want to tell you. And I said, okay, Grandma. And I sat down at the kitchen table, the big wooden table. I still remember the way the light came through the window of that kitchen. And she said, this is really important. You have to know this. There will come a time when people on the earth will not be able to buy or sell unless they have a number and unless they take a mark, which will be the Mark of the Beast. And I'm actually quite glad my grandmother told me that when she did, because she died a year later. I miss her very much to this day. But she explained to me that this would be coming some point in the distant future. And as I looked across the kitchen and I saw the grocery bags from our shopping trip there, I said, Grandma, you mean even groceries, even food? She said, especially food. That's how they're going to get people to sign up. Because if you can't buy food, you can't survive. And that's what's going to cause the masses of humanity to sign up for the Mark of the Beast. Now, sitting in that little kitchen in the Midwest at age 8, I made a couple of decisions. And the first decision I made was that I would pass this on to my grandkids, so they could pass it on to their grandkids and their grandkids. And someday, thousands of years later, when this prophecy came to pass, my descendants would know not to participate in this whole scheme of the mark of the beast. They'd know not to take it. And the second decision I made was that if it did happen in my lifetime, which seemed incredibly unlikely, this was the early 1970s. In fact, there were hardly barcodes, and there weren't credit cards, and if there were, I hadn't seen them. There were not computers. The ones that were took up whole rooms of buildings and certainly weren't in stores. At that time, this seemed like such an outlandishly unlikely thing to ever happen in my lifetime that I made a promise that if it did happen in my lifetime, I would pull out my Bible and I would read very carefully, and I would know that the words in the Bible were true. Now, one of the things I liken this to is if someone had sat me down and said, you know, someday there's going to be a big purple flower and it's going to cover 2/3 of the sky, and when you see that, you know, that Hopi prophecy, whatever it is, then take that seriously. The unlikeliness of that would make you pay attention. Well, in the early 1970s, this truly was an outlandish thought, that everyone on the planet, first of all, could even be identified, and that everyone on the planet could be forced to somehow take a number to buy or sell, just didn't make sense to my little brain. Now, about 5 years ago, in studying supermarket loyalty cards, which I actually started studying just because I found them annoying, and I didn't like the idea of somebody tracking my purchases through a piece of plastic. It began to occur to me that by presenting that piece of plastic on my supermarket loyalty card, that I actually was presenting a number in order to buy or sell. Now, I suppose I was doing the same thing when I presented a credit card to make a purchase, because a credit card takes a number, links that number up with you into a database, which is a numbered account, and pulls that money out, and no real money ever changes hands when you scan a credit card. It's really paying with a number. And the more I began to think about that, the more I began to think about all of the cards in my wallet, and the fact that every single one of those cards contained a number, and that every one of them was linked up to a database, and they all involved this information moving around through computers, which is all digital information. And the more I thought about that, the more my grandmother's words came back to me. And I started to say, maybe it's time to pay attention a little bit to these numbers that we're using to make purchases, to buy and sell. And that is what got me started to launch an organization called Caspian, which is Consumers Against Supermarket Privacy Invasion and Numbering. Christians in the audience may know that C.S. Lewis, the wonderful Christian theologian, authored a series of children's books, the first of which is called The Chronicles of Narnia, or The Chronicles of Narnia. The first one is The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Many people may have read that. And one of those books contains a character, Prince Caspian, and in fact 2 of the books. And in one of them, The Voyage of the Dawn Treader, Prince Caspian actually sails out to these islands and encounters lots of things going wrong and tries to right some wrongs that he comes across. And I felt at that point that the kind of privacy invasion that I was seeing with these supermarket cards that were registering people's information in databases, that perhaps Prince Caspian would be an appropriate role model to go out and do some exploration, do a little bit of learning, and hopefully right some wrongs that I encountered when I was out there. And also the Christian reference and the wonderful experience of reading C.S. Lewis as a child helped in coming up with that name. So what I found as I began to look into the numbered systems is that there is a huge movement afoot across the globe to move all payments towards numerical systems, and possibly to move them towards mark systems. And let's dive in and see how this particular piece of prophecy may be coming true in a way that it couldn't have done in the early 1970s, and particularly not 2,000 years ago. The first word I want to draw your attention to here is forced everyone. Now, everyone is an important word here. It means literally everyone. And in fact, in case that wasn't clear, the author actually clarifies it for us. Small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, I mean literally everyone. Now, 2,000 years ago, identifying even the boundaries of the planet Earth was not possible. There were continents that did not know of the existence of other continents. There were peoples in certain places that didn't know there were people on the other side of